Hello and welcome to Cherry Red TV and AFC Wimbledon TV. And we have another interview in our series talking to Wimbledon FC legends. And today we have Iain Cooke. Hi Iain.
Hello Iain.
And of course you played for Wimbledon over a very long period, most of your career, and you scored 290 goals in 595 games, which is quite a strike record because you weren't even playing as a forward the whole time.
No, I started out up front, working off the centre forward, and then moved back into midfield.
So let's start at the beginning of your sports career, if you like. So when you were a kid, I gather you played both rugby and football at school.
Yes, my father was a good sportsman, and he had actually been a junior goalkeeper for Kingstonian until he got a knee injury. And in those days, a knee injury, such as a cartilage, which it was terminal. So he didn't play serious football again. But he was very keen on most sports, and he was also a very good cricketer. I've still got scorebooks that show his hundreds and other scores when he played for our local church men's club, which was a reasonable standard of football, of cricket.
Cricket, right? Yeah.
Take that out.
So you at school, you were, I think you told me earlier, you were actually playing rugby in the morning on Saturdays and football in the afternoon. So you were very committed to sport, weren't you?
Yes. When I was at primary school, it was football because the school was within 100 yards of Fulham football ground. So that's probably what started it all off. And I lived half a mile from Fulham football ground as well. Right. And I was a season ticket holder. My father got myself and my brother a season ticket when I was 10 years old. So we were regulars at Fulham. Started playing football and cricket at primary school. We had a school team in the Fulham Schoolboys League, and I was chosen when I was 10 years old to represent Fulham primary schools, and found myself playing wing forward with Freddie Callaghan.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he went on, as you know, to become professional at Fulham and subsequently a manager and did a lot of good things in his career. And but when I played with Freddie, he was about 2 foot tall, and he eventually became about 6 foot tall. And so I started playing football then. When I went to grammar school at Emmanuel in Wandsworth, it was a rugby school. So there was no option to play football.
You had to play rugby at school.
Had to play rugby.
Yeah.
If I'd have gone to say what a school, I think it was called Wandsworth Grammar, they did predominantly football. But I went to Emmanuel and started learning and playing rugby, and in the winter, but was still involved with the church youth club.
Yeah.
Who had a football team.
Right.
And they played their games on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
So I was playing rugby for the school, either against other schools or in what we called house matches on a Saturday morning. And then sometime, not every Saturday, and then in the afternoon I would go and turn out for All Saints Fulham Boys Club in football matches. So yes, it was.
And did you have a preference? Was football still your preference as a sport?
Yes,
yeah.
I always preferred football,
Yeah.
but being at a rugby school, it was Hobson's really, and
Yes.
so I knuckled down, got on with it, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, and then I think things started to get a bit more serious when you got your first job and you worked for the National Westminster Bank?
Westminster Bank.
Called Westminster Bank in those days.
It was called
yeah.
Westminster Bank in those days. My brother had joined them 2 years before. My father was most insistent that you try to get a career for life, a job for life, but not only that, but the company that we worked for had good facilities outside of work, and particularly sports facilities. And at that time, although I didn't know it, Westminster Bank had the largest football club in the UK, possibly in the world, turning out 16 teams every Saturday.
Right, which is very impressive, isn't it?
Yeah. And my first game for Westminster Bank was before I joined them, because with my brother involved, and he'd got into the first team, my brother Alan had actually been to Wimbledon and played for the Wimbledon A side. Through my, this sounds like a big connection, but my brother's godfather, who we used to call Uncle, was a guy called Alec Fuse, who was a school teacher, but prior to the war had played for Wimbledon. And after the war, he stayed involved with Wimbledon and finished up being Wimbledon press secretary.
Okay.
So through Alec, he got my brother a trial at Wimbledon. My brother played with people like Mick Kelly in the A side. And then when I joined Westminster Bank, my brother had stopped playing for Wimbledon, but had got into the first team of Westminster Bank in the Southern Amateur League, which was quite a good standard. And through my brother, he arranged for me to play in a midweek game, which was Westminster Bank against a London FA Schoolboys 11. So I actually played in that game, scored a hat-trick, and when I joined the bank fully in the 1st of January or 2nd of January 1961, I started playing for the bank in their reserve team, and then made the first team a couple of months afterwards.
And you were playing up front then, were you?
I was, yes. Yeah. But looking back, that did give me a great advantage, because most 16-year-olds were not playing against men. And playing against men from such an early age, and men who were fairly worldly wise as far as the football is concerned, and at a reasonable standard, you learnt an awful lot.
Toughened you up, didn't it?
Toughened you up. I remember getting body checked when I was running almost at full speed by a left back at Carshalton Football Club, and he hit me with his shoulder fully, the whole of my body, and he just knocked me down and stood and looked at me, just laughing, and I was absolutely winded and felt awful.
Yeah.
Wasn't carried off, but I made my way to the touchline. It took me 10 minutes to recover. And those sort of things toughen you up when you're 16 years old, just out of school, and you're playing against these guys, some of whom have been around a bit, tried their luck with amateur clubs, semi-professional clubs or whatever. And I felt that was probably a good learning curve.
Sounds like it, yeah. Yeah, and playing rugby must have toughened you up as well, because that's quite a physical game too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you actually get to start being involved with Wimbledon FC? How did that come about?
Well, not happy with playing rugby on a Saturday morning or football on a Saturday afternoon. A friend of mine was playing for a team called Cooke Colts in the West London League, managed by a gentleman by the name of Jack Goodgame, who had two sons, both playing for Cooke Colts, but one of the sons was also on Fulham's books. And he didn't turn out for Cooke Colts because he would have been silly to risk injury, because he was in Fulham's youth team / reserve team, and it was, if he got an injury he would have been out. So but Jack, I through my friend, I went and got a game on a Sunday morning for Cooke Colts and found that the standard of football was quite good. The boys were all under 20, but some of them were playing for good amateur clubs on a Saturday, so the standard was quite good. And after I'd been playing for them for about 6 months, Jack had a word with me and said, I know a man at Wimbledon called Eddie Jennings, who was training the third team, and he said, why don't you go down and ask for a trial? And that's how I started to get involved with Wimbledon. I went down on a Tuesday night, thinking that it had all been set up, and Mr. Jennings would say to me, welcome, you're Iain Cooke, aren't you? And when I got there and said, could I see Mr. Jennings came along, and Eddie, as I always knew him afterwards, said, who are you? And I explained to him, and when I said that Jack Goodgame has sent me, he said, he has he? And it didn't encourage me too much, the way I was received at my first. He said, well, you better put some kit on and come and join in.
So you had to prove yourself.
I did, and funnily enough, the thing that always sticks out in my mind is we used to train across the pitch at Plough Lane in one half, and we had a five-a-side to finish off training. I must say I found the training more physical than anything I'd previously done, and I did train once a week with Westminster Bank anyway. But just towards the end of this five-a-side match, the ball came to me, and as it came to me, Eddie sort of called out, OK, that's it for the night. But I was already in the throes of getting to this ball, and I cracked it from about 30 yards, and it stayed about 2 foot off the ground and slammed into the goal. And he turned round and he said, who hit that? And I said, oh, I did. I'm sorry, I didn't realise you'd called time. And he sort of looked at me, and I think I realised that the actual shot and the way it had gone in had sort of impressed him. And I found myself selected for the A side for not the following Saturday, but a game anyway. And I played at Wimbledon Park.
Okay, so the A side was in fact the third team.
That was really the youth side.
The youth side.
Yes, third team stroke youth side. They were all boys of about 20 years old or younger. Yeah.
And had you seen Wimbledon play before, the first team?
I had, but it was on a Saturday morning, a rearranged game, because on this particular Saturday afternoon there were a lot of amateur international games, and Wimbledon first team comprised 7 or 8 amateur internationals. So the team that I watched, who actually beat Walthamstow Avenue on a Saturday morning,
right,
and I was standing on the terracing at the far end of the ground.
Yeah.
And I was watching people like Joe Wallace, Bob, Frank Tolfrey, all people that, although they were in the first team squad, were not first choice first teamers. But later on, of course, I looked back and realised that these were the guys I was playing with them, and I'd watched them on that Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I'd been down there. I was surprised at how nice the ground was. I was expecting sort of a little bit of terracing maybe, and a rope round one side of the pitch. And of course, when I got there, my brother had been before, and that was why I went with my brother and a friend. But I realised it was a much more professional setup.
It was professional setup, even though it was an amateur club, wasn't it then?
Yes.
Because they were playing in the Isthmian League at that point, which was an amateur league, and none of the players were getting paid, or not officially getting paid anyway. So anyway, let's follow your career through. So you played this game. What was your first game like for the A team? Did you play well?
Looking back, I don't think I played particularly well, no. And I was at work on a Friday afternoon the following week, having been selected to play for NatWest first team in a league match, and suddenly a man walked in with a telegram.
A telegram?
A telegram. Well, in those days they had...
I understand.
I mean, I didn't know this, but one of the cashiers suddenly appeared by my side and said, we've just had a telegram delivered for you.
Which is always, in those days, good news or bad news, nothing in between.
And, of course, I opened it with some trepidation, wondering what it was, and it said on it, selected to play for reserves at Leytonstone, Saturday PM, please confirm availability. And that was at about 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and I had to then phone up the captain of the NatWest first 11, who I can tell you was not best pleased, who had then to start the wheels in motion to move people up 16 sides into the side above, because they didn't have substitutes.
Right, of course,
which caused no ends of aggravation. As I say, he wasn't best pleased, but I played at Leytonstone, and we won 4-1, and I scored a goal, and was then in. I felt that I got in and was playing for the reserves after that.
Right. And which year was that?
1963.
And you were 16, 17 years old?
Yeah, I was 17, I think. Yes,
Okay.
Born in 44.
Okay, so when did you actually get your first team appearance?
For Wimbledon.
Yeah.
1964-5.
And how did that come about?
Well, let me say, when I joined Wimbledon, It was going into a different world from anything I'd known before. The whole setup was very professional. Even at the reserve team games, there were directors there wearing collars and ties and blazers. You almost had to call people sir. The first team comprised, as I said, of 7 or 8 amateur internationals between Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England. Everything was done properly. And it was a setup which you couldn't fail to be impressed by. And at the end of my first season, as mainly in the reserves, I played the last 6 games of the season in the first team because I'd scored quite a lot of goals in the reserves, and we were in the Isthmian League, and I think it was Jeff Ham, who was the inside forward and amateur international, who got injured, and Les Henley put me in the side. Now, at the end of that season, because of this business about payment of players, the FA had declared that they would not allow amateurs to be paid other than expenses, but they knew that it was going on, and that if they found out that it had been going on, the person they would go for would be the chairman, not the players or the manager. Now, because of this, Sidney Black, who was the chairman and a very prim and proper person, said that he couldn't countenance anything that might lead to him being prosecuted in a court of law.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And he said, I am not playing the players, but I don't know what goes on with someone else, and I'm not prepared to take that risk. Hence, the meeting that was called, an AGM was called, a special AGM was called, with the supporters and the directors, with a view to joining the Southern League, which the directors had discussed. So becoming...
That was a semi-pro league, wasn't it?
Semi-pro league, and moving away from the full amateur status.
You see, it's something that I didn't fully realise until I did a bit of research for this interview, but that was a huge thing in those days, amateur football. And in fact, the Wimbledon gates were far more when they were amateur than when they reverted to professional. There were certain people, a lot of people that liked to watch amateur football, and if they're going to watch pro football, they'd go and watch a Fulham or a Chelsea or an Arsenal or something, a top team.
Yeah. Yes, the gates were going down slowly.
But they were getting about 5,000 or 6,000 for the big matches.
They were getting quite big gates at
which
that
is
time.
Fantastic for amateur football.
Yeah, I mean, they had at times got sort of 10,000 people in there for special FA Cup matches, and especially against people like Kingstonian and Tooting, who were the local rivals, and that rivalry had been going on for many, many years, since before the war. So that was always a big local derby attraction. But the meeting was held, the decision was made. Sidney Black stood up and gave the most impressive speech you could ever hear as to why the club wanted to take this course of action. And in the end, although there was a certain number of people who put their hands up against it, the vast majority were taken along by Sidney Black, and the vote was carried. And so we became a professional club, and it was at that stage that I had a problem, because I worked for NatWest Bank, for whom I'd signed a working contract that said I would not be allowed to have any outside employment that paid me money. And I checked this out with the bank, and the bank said, no, you can't sign a contract. So I informed Les Henley, the manager, who had been there for several years and had tremendous success, winning the FA Amateur Cup in 1963 and the league several times. And he took me aside and he said to me, all the other players were signing contracts, and that if I couldn't sign a contract, I would really be a free agent. And as a free agent, if he played me in the first team and someone else came along and tapped me up, for want of another expression, I could go with no ties, and all the work that he'd done on me would be wasted. So he said, you either sign or you don't play in the first team. And I discussed this with my father, and my father said, well, you don't, whatever you do, jeopardise your bank career. So it was left like that, and I started the next season in the reserves, where I stayed for quite some time. Having said that, the reserves were playing in the Suburban League, and we were playing the likes of Tottenham, Charlton, third teams, and we occasionally got gates of over 2,000 people in the reserve team.
Yeah.
When we played Tottenham at home, we had over 2,000 people, and I scored 2 goals and we won 2-0, and the atmosphere was tremendous. And I think that Les Henley started to open his eyes wide, and with my goal scoring record at that time, wanted me to sign. So we had another meeting whereby my father and I met Les Henley and Sidney Black at Plough Lane, and they said they wanted me to sign professional forms, and my father put his point of view and the bank's point of view. And Sidney Black, who ran an estate agency come property dealing agency, offered me a job at his office.
Right.
My father was horrified that I might be tempted, because he offered me more money. He asked me what I was getting in the bank, and he offered to increase that.
Yeah.
And when we finished, my father said, I will talk to Iain, and I will get Iain to talk to the bank, but for the time being, we'll leave it like that. I don't think that Les and Sidney Black were very pleased, but that's how it was left. And I went to the bank, and I had a meeting with the senior personnel manager at Lothbury, who had, prior to the meeting, and unbeknown to me, asked a chap who'd just joined the bank, who was an ex-professional footballer, to be there. And after I'd spoken to the personnel manager, the professional footballer was in a room, and they ushered me into the room, and he tried to dissuade me from any thoughts of signing any contracts. So it was a setup.
Yeah.
The personnel manager said to me, when you've thought about it, give me a call and we'll discuss it again. I called him within the week and said, I still want to go ahead. And he said, OK, you can do. But you must have a special clause written into your contract with the football club saying that in the event of any overlap of your time, the bank must take precedence. Yeah. If there was any conflict between your interests with the football club and the bank, the contract must say, we have precedent. So I went to the football club. They had a contract drawn up which had an extra clause in it, which I've still got at home, which said, in the event of conflict, the bank takes precedent, and I signed.
And how much were they paying you, the football club, in those days?
About £10 a week.
£10 a week.
But I think the bank was paying me £60 a week or £50 a week. So, well, no, a lot less than that probably. So it wasn't as bad as it sounds, because you've got to look at the value of money in those days, and it had win bonuses in it as well.
Anyway, so your first proper season in the first team was 64-65.
64-65, yeah.
Which was the Wimbledon's first season in the Southern League, but it was Division 1, which was
it was
in effect the second division.
Yeah. In fact, I think I had very few games in that season, and I remember being a little bit upset because we were due to play Hereford, and Hereford and Wimbledon were top of the table, with Hereford just shading it.
Right.
But Hereford had John Charles playing for them. And on the day that we played Hereford at Plough Lane, there was a massive crowd because John Charles was the attraction.
He's a legend, yeah.
Yeah. And I was playing for the reserves somewhere else, so I missed it.
Okay.
I think Tommy McCready was playing in that one.
Right.
And all the stalwarts that were there, the Eddie Reynoldses and the Roy Laws and Johnny Martins, because 90% of them had been retained. And one of the few players that came in that I remember was signed, apart from Tommy, who was signed from Watford, was John Cartwright, who'd been at West Ham and he'd been at other places, but was very well known. and we signed. I think he was at Bath when we signed him, and I was a bit upset at not even being in the squad. I think substitutes might have been allowed. I'm not sure.
Was there quite a few new players brought in when Wimbledon went from amateur to professional?
No.
So it was pretty much the same squad, but now getting a few Bob officially.
I can only remember two, Tommy McCready and Johnny Cartwright. There may have been one or two others, but the basis of the squad was the squad that had previously won the Isthmian League and the Amateur Cup the season before. Okay. Les Henley had been out and brought in players who were well known in the amateur ranks, who had played for other clubs, who were amateur international status. The likes of Bobby Ardrey, Jeff Ham, Eddie Reynolds, a legend, scored 4 goals with his head at Wembley. Yeah. And as I say, to go into that side, as I did for those last 6 amateur games, and be playing alongside the likes of these guys, it was awe-inspiring.
Because Wimbledon had pretty much done what they could at that level, because they'd won the Isthmian League, I think, the last 3 seasons.
Yes.
They'd won the Amateur Cup, as you mentioned.
Yes.
So there was nowhere else really to go, was there?
No.
Back to turn professional and go up to the Southern League.
I think apart from the fact, this business about the payment of players, there was also, as you say, that we'd been there, we'd done it, or they'd done it, not me, they'd done it, and gates were definitely dwindling. It was a symptom of the game at that time anyway.
Yes.
But there is no doubt that going in, although there was a lot of concern amongst the supporters, going into the semi-professional ranks was a fillip to the club and actually increased the gates. Yeah.
Okay, so basically you did get established, and I'm looking at my notes here, you did get established in the first team. I think it was 65-66 was your first season, which was the first season that Wimbledon played in the Southern League Premier Division.
Yes.
And then Les Henley was the manager at that time.
Yes.
And then there was several seasons where they did quite well. I got the league positions 5th, 4th, 2nd, 3rd, 5th. So they were up there, which was pretty good, because they'd come up from Isthmian, then Division 1 Southern, Premier Southern. So they're off to a pretty good start.
Yeah.
So what were you feeling then as a part-time footballer? Did you feel you might end up being a pro footballer one day?
Yes, I would have liked to have had a chance, certainly. It didn't happen. I was scoring a good number of goals in the league and cup. I did have an injury. I can't remember what year that was, but we were playing Kingstonian in a midweek league game, and as I went in with a tackle, the goalie dived, and he dived across my knee, and I got knee ligament damage, and I was then out for several weeks. They didn't do reconstruction jobs in those days. You had physio, and you gradually got better, started training again, and then picked it up where you left off. And that's what I did. So I did have a bad knee injury when I was in my early 20s. When I got back in, I started scoring goals again, but was still playing up front alongside the likes of Jerry O'Rourke, and started with Eddie Reynolds and Jerry O'Rourke. But yeah, I would have loved to have had a chance at
Did anyone offer you a trial at a bigger club?
Not directly. There were all sorts of rumours, but I won't say any more because nothing was ever said to me. The one thing that was said at one stage was that I had a problem because I was working for a bank, and because I had a good job with good money, the problem would be that to lure me away,
has to be quite a decent
they didn't
salary.
pay that sort of money.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
So in a way it worked against me, because having a job where I was getting paid good money, they would have had to have offered quite a bit more to have coaxed me into full-time professional football. In actual fact, they wouldn't, because I'd have gone.
So were you a good banker? This is the question.
Well, I was what I would call a steady banker.
Okay.
There was always this theory in that sort of job. You kept your nose clean, and you gradually moved up the ladder.
Were you getting a big bonus?
No, we were honest to goodness branch bankers who believed that
Okay.
if you looked after your customers, the business would grow.
So you were a branch manager?
I did finish up as a branch manager,
Yeah,
but
that was later
I
on,
also
then.
moved into personal banking, so I was dealing
Yeah.
directly with a number of clients rather than with a full raft of branch customers.
Okay, but meantime, the Wimbledon manager changed.
The Wimbledon manager changed.
Tell us about the change and what you felt about the change.
Well, Les Henley had done very, very well. The one thing he hadn't done was to win the
Southern League.
the Southern League.
Came second, but didn't actually win it.
If you speak to supporters from that era, I think the feeling was the same as what the players felt. There were 2 seasons that we had every opportunity to win, and we fell at the final hurdle. We were in a strong position to win the league. We were going well, and we unfortunately came unstuck invariably on hard pitches towards the end of the season. Suffered a couple of injuries with 1 or 2 key players, but generally it was the form just waned. And I suppose if you look at how the directors felt about that, they will probably blame the manager, which was why the manager left. But he had got us in a position where we could and should have won the league at least once, possibly twice, sitting pretty just before Easter, playing 3 games around the Easter period. I can remember going to Stevenage, and when we got there, the grass was very sparse, the pitch was dusty, the ball bounced 10, 20 feet in the air when it landed, and it was a lottery as to who won. Skill took a back seat. It was all about effort and having big players in the side, and we weren't the biggest side in the world. And we were outgunned, I suppose, and we fell at the final hurdle on a couple of occasions when we were sitting in nice positions. And I think that was the downfall of the manager. He was a good manager. He was an Arsenal player, not a first-team player, but he was an Arsenal player, and had gone into management and had done very, very well.
Okay, so he left and Mike Everett came in.
Yes.
What difference did he make?
Unfortunately, I don't have many happy memories of the Mike Everett era. He seemed to take the view that the senior players... I wasn't a senior player. I was still in my mid-20s. But the senior players like Roy Law, John Martin and others needed to be got rid of. That's okay if you have in mind bringing in better players. But some of the players he brought in weren't better than what he was getting rid of. But he almost went out of his way to upset and leave out the players that had made their names at Wimbledon, who still had a lot to offer. And during that sort of period of time, there was a certain amount of unrest in the side. Players came, players went. Gates went down. We weren't doing particularly well. Mike was playing himself at right back. Not all the time, but some of the time. He was a very hard tackler. He said some things in the dressing room which, to be quite honest, I wouldn't have expected a manager to be saying.
He wasn't too complimentary at times.
It wasn't so much that, it was what he said about the opposition. It was things like, those guys are out there to take your money. Well, that isn't what you think about when you're gearing yourself up to a football match. Go in hard and hit them if you have to, sort of thing. It's overemphasis on things which...
He was trying to over-motivate you a little bit.
Yeah, I think so, but it didn't really work. And during that period of time, I was going on the pitch not quite fully understanding what my role was. Score goals, but not really understanding the methodology of what he was trying to teach. Other players were also in a bit of a quandary. Some of the players that had come in weren't as good as the players that had gone. A lot of them were young players. He was trying to influence these young players to be tough guys all the time, rather than concentrating on our own style of play. And, well, he didn't last long, did he?
No. And then Dick Graham came in.
Dick Graham came in with a record of being a
Yeah.
very good manager,
Yeah.
of good motivation, but unfortunately Dick tried to run the side while he was running a newsagent shop in Colchester. And I think that sums it up. Dick didn't always come to training.
Yeah.
He sometimes left the training in the hands of Danny Keenan, who was an ex-boxer, who was not clued up to football,
Yeah.
who was an honest-to-goodness sort of a guy, and was trying to get us as fit as possible, but we needed, again, a method of play, a style of play which everybody understood.
Yes.
And the sort of thing we did when Danny was there, bless his heart, was we went out pounding the roads on a Thursday night with a game on a Saturday. And anyone will tell you running around concrete streets on a Thursday night, running around the heart of Wimbledon was not the best.
Yeah.
It made your muscles stiff as much as anything. And the fact that Dick wasn't there was a bit of a...
Took away the focus for you guys.
Yeah,
didn't
it caused a problem. It led to some undermining of his authority.
Yeah.
The fact that he hadn't come, presumably because his shop they were running late or whatever, or he didn't shut the shop till 7 or 8 o'clock, and travelling from Colchester was going to be a problem anyway. So Dick started to bring in one or two players, some young players who had been at the likes of Colchester or Brighton or whatever, and had been released, like the sort of thing that happens now, and Dick was picking them up, and they showed a lot of promise. And the one thing that Dick did, which Wimbledon should always be grateful to him for, was to bring in Mickey Mann.
Okay.
And Mickey Mann was a tremendous person, a tremendous footballer. Had played in Dick's Colchester side when they beat Leeds in the cup. And apart from that, again, he was... Again, we had a method of play, but we didn't really do anything that got us into a regular pattern of play where we were winning games. And it was still, to some extent, a certain amount of turmoil was there. But if I can just mention that going back, after I'd been at the club when I got into the first team for the last 6 games of the season when they were Isthmian League, I suddenly received a letter from Sydney Black. Would you like to join us for our tour of Paris at Easter? Whitsun.
Okay.
He said, unfortunately, we can't offer you a position on the summer tour to Spain, which is where the players were being taken. But we can offer you a place on the Whitsun tour to Paris for a long weekend. Fantastic. First time I'd flown.
Yeah.
And I found myself up the top of the Eiffel Tower with one of the other players watching football, however many feet it is below. But Sydney Black, to get back to the point, Sydney Black started to suffer from ill health. He was the money behind the club. He had bequeathed in a deed of covenant something like £6,000 a year to Wimbledon Football Club. After 2 of those years had gone, he suddenly died. Now, that really was the start of problems, because Sydney had surrounded himself with people who weren't moneyed people. He didn't want opposition. He wanted people to run the club who were very efficient administrators, but he didn't want a voice that was going to be against him. And that was a problem, in as much as that money was what was running Wimbledon Football Club for the next 5 years. And when it ran out, probably around the late 1960s, 70s time, the gates weren't supporting the players, and that was when things started to go wrong. So that may have been why the release, when Mickey Everett came, the players were being released because they were being paid a wage that was too high for the club to afford. I don't know that, but it may have been a reason.
Yeah.
So,
certainly the league positions for the years he was there was sort of 10th, 12th and 12th. They were, for Wimbledon, quite poor positions.
We were in trouble at certain stages. We looked as if we might finish lower than that, and one way or another we managed to pick up. But the gates were going down. The money wasn't coming in. And then when Dick Graham, I think Dick had a year and almost, maybe a year and 3/4 with us. But this business of not being at training sometimes was a problem. The morale was a problem. And then, of course, Dick got the sack with something like, I'll have a guess and say 10 games left to the end of the season.
In March, I think it was.
Yeah. 10 games left to the end of the season. Relegation, a serious problem.
Yeah.
A serious threat. Players who, the sort of thing that had happened when Dick Graham was there, one of the players he signed, he was in and he was out, and Dick gave him a bit of stick. And we were picking players up on the coach when we were approaching the M1 sort of thing, and this player just wasn't where he should be. So we went on without him.
Yeah.
And he was a centre forward. And that sort of...
So you left the player on the M1?
No, he wasn't there.
I see.
He didn't turn up.
Oh, I see, yeah.
He was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Now, all that sort of thing affects morale dreadfully, because it means that the side that was picked and the notice had gone up, this is the side for Saturday, had to be rearranged, which meant that the second choice was coming in, and it wasn't very motivating to think that we were forced to play a second choice player in an away game that we were going to. So there we were, something like 10 games from the end of the season, in serious relegation problems. And when they sacked Dick Graham, the chairman came to 3 of us senior players, I was 27, 28 at the time, and said, for the time being, and to the end of the season, we'd like you to run the side, and we need to get out of relegation. The players were myself, Tommy McCready, and John Laughlin, who'd been signed from Crystal Palace. Maybe not directly from Crystal Palace, but John was about 32, 33, 34, and had been a Football League player, and had the experience. So he was a right back, and the 3 of us were picking the side. So we sat the players down and we said, this is what we're left with. This is what we need to do. We will be picking the side, and we want a response from you guys, because if we go along as we are, we're going to be in a battle and possibly in the relegation zone very quickly. And the first thing we did was to leave out 2 or 3 of the players that we knew were not having a good time, but because Dick had brought them in, he was playing them. And we put in the players that we knew wanted to play, who were hungry to play. I think one of them was a youngish lad, but he had shown that he'd got ability. And lo and behold, we managed to finish up out of the relegation zone. And that was when Alan Batsford arrived during the closed season.
Yeah, so that would have been sort of May, June 74.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were interviews being held, we knew, being held during the closed season for a manager. But I would say, as far as morale was concerned amongst the players, it was about rock bottom. We'd avoided relegation, and we'd avoided it comfortably in the end. Because I think out of those last 10 games that I was talking about, we won something like 4 of them, or 5, and drew 2 or 3. So we actually got just below mid-table. But morale was not good.
So Alan came in, and he made some wholesale changes, didn't he, pretty quickly?
He did, but what happened was, because of the turmoil at the club at that time, they had forgotten to send out the retainer notices, which have to go out to players a month before the end of the season. If you don't do that, players become a free agent. So every player was released, if you like, unintentionally. So there was a situation when Alan came in that he had these players. Tommy McCready had already gone off and signed for Dulwich Hamlet. Other players had said that they wanted away anyway. And Alan came in, and as he will tell you, I think he had 7 players.
There were 7 players, and he brought 7 players with him.
He brought 6 or 7 players from Walton.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So in a way, it wasn't such a bad thing that players could walk, because only the ones that wanted to stay stayed, I presume, or maybe the ones stayed that nobody else wanted. I don't know.
Well, obviously, with hindsight, had the players known what was going to happen, I think a lot of them all would have stayed. But as I say, the turmoil and it was chaotic in many respects on the footballing side. And I think some of the players had had enough. They'd had it with Mike Everett, they'd had it with Dick Graham, they'd been in the side, out the side,
Yeah.
They weren't sure where they stood. And I suspect that other clubs were coming in and tapping some of them up, knowing that there was a problem.
Okay, so Alan came in. Had you met him before?
No. Oh, only when we played Walton and Hersham.
What was your first impression when he came into Wimbledon?
I met Alan at a team meeting, and I knew of his record, so I knew that he was a good manager. I had heard about his disciplinary code of conduct, so to speak, and that he was a hard taskmaster. So that was what I knew about Alan.
How did you feel about that?
I thought it was what we needed.
Right.
We needed some semblance of order restored, and quickly. When I met Alan, yes, he came over as a hard taskmaster, and I had a meeting with him, and he told me that he would want to retain me, and we discussed one or two other things, and then pre-season training started, and I had my eyes opened.
So what happened?
I think I probably crawled off the training pitch after the first session. Never done anything like it in my life. Never
Really?
done anything like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So what kind of things did he have you do that you hadn't done before?
well, he had a regime whereby him and his assistant Brian Hall, they wanted every player to run a certain distance on the nights when the Tuesday night, which was the physical training night. Thursdays was too close to Saturdays, and then some Tuesdays or weekdays we had a match day. So on the Tuesday and pre-season, we were running a set distance, and we would do something like 3 or 4 quarter miles, 220s, 100 yards, and then sprints, shuttle runs, and no one was excused. You had to do it, and you had to do it to the best of your ability. Obviously, there were slower players and quicker. I don't mean slower in terms of running 50 yards. I mean running 440 yards. I was never a good 440-yard runner. Jerry O'Rourke used to be, in his day, could run all day. So some players... The Walton players were used to it, so they knew what to expect. But it was a regime that was ruthless. It was as much as I could do to crawl into bed sometimes.
But then you lost the first game, didn't you, that season?
Yeah. There's
So
a story
maybe
about that.
he
No,
wore you
there's a
out.
story about that. Alan took me aside. I think what happened, and Alan may confirm this, but I think what happened, I think that the directors, from the players that had remained, I think the directors said to Alan, we would like Iain Cooke to be captain. And Alan made me captain. Otherwise, I think Dave Bassett would have been captain.
And how did you feel about being made captain?
I was very pleased.
Okay.
I was delighted. Pre-season went okay. We did everything. Alan obviously changed players around. First game of the season, just to go back to the training, what I would say is after 2 or 3 weeks, I felt so good. I felt better than I'd ever felt before. The effect of doing what we'd done, and pre-season was also running over Wimbledon Common, uphill and down dell, and it was also weight training, which I'd never done before, which I did start to wonder whether it would make me too muscly and I'd be muscle bound and lose my speed, but it helped because we were doing it for speed. And there were all sorts of other things, not just the running, but we were hurdling and jumping over hurdles, which once you've been running, you did your certain amount of running and you felt quite worn out, and then you'd be faced with running again, but this time you had to jump over hurdles. Yeah. So it was all preparation for fitness and getting you ready for the start of the season. To go on to the first game of the season, we were going up to Nuneaton, I think, yes, it was Nuneaton. And during the closed season, the one player that I can remember, there may have been others, but the one player that came in who was neither Wimbledon nor Walton, and I think he came in then, was Dave Lucas, a 6'2" young midfield player who I think had been on the books at Chelsea. This team was selected and I wasn't playing, and my heart sank a million miles. I couldn't believe it.
You've done all that training.
I'd been in the pre-season friendlies, and I knew that in some of the pre-season friendlies I was taken off, or I didn't start and I was put on later. I didn't see it coming, and I was surprised because I as I say, I was as fit as much more fit than I'd ever been in my life. And I sat on the bench at Nuneaton, and all sorts of thoughts were going through my head. Should I have gone with Tommy? What am I doing here? Why am I on the bench? And anyway, unfortunately, we lost the game. I got on with about quarter of an hour left. Tuesday night, we were due to play Yeovil at home. And obviously, Alan had sat down with... it was 1-0, I think, at Nuneaton. I may be wrong, but I think it was 1-0. And Alan must have sat down with Brian Hall and discussed it. And maybe it was because Nuneaton was an away game and Yeovil was a home game, and he wanted to take the game to Yeovil. But I was included, and I scored, and I wasn't out again.
Yeah. I think they won or didn't lose for something like 22 matches of the incredible run. Yeah. And of course, that season was special for another reason as well, wasn't it?
It was indeed.
Do you want to talk us through that?
Yes. We had our first cup run under Alan, who the previous season had led Walton and Hersham into, I'm not sure which round of the FA Cup, but they'd gone and they'd played Brian Clough's Brighton and Hove Albion.
And beaten them, yeah.
And beaten them.
Resoundingly
And they hadn't only beaten them, they beat them 4-1.
4-0, I think it was.
4-0,
yeah.
4-0. Yeah. Which wasn't just a beating, that was a hiding, really.
Yeah.
So Brian Clough couldn't possibly say you were lucky. And the rumour has it that Brian Clough had shouted something out in the first half to his players, something about you can beat these donkeys.
Didn't know, did they?
And when they were 4-0 up, Dave Bassett had gone over to Brian Clough and went, eat all.
Anyway,
so there we are.
Stick to Wimbledon. So.
Yes, we had a cup run which started, if I'm right, at Bracknell. And I've got a feeling we went 1-0 down at Bracknell, who were a much lower league side than us. And I think we won that by 3-1 or something like that. And then we went on to have some really good games. And in sequence, I can't remember them, but I think one of them was Kettering. And then we finished up playing Burnley.
Well, but yeah, that was okay. So Wimbledon got to the third round of the FA Cup for the first time.
Yes. And
Burnley with them were a very good side in the old First Division, the top division.
Yeah.
And they had some internationals playing them, didn't they?
Yeah.
They had some really good players. And I think the stats was that Wimbledon were given no chance because no non-league team had won at a First Division ground for over 50 years in the FA Cup.
Yes.
Anyway, you guys went along there.
Yeah.
I remember once you told me a story that when you got there, you did stay the night and you were in the bar of the hotel and some Burnley supporters came in.
Some Burnley supporters came in and they realised who we were and they started some light-hearted banter. Excuse me. They started some banter, which we responded to, But the gist of it was, nice of you to come, lads, but, you know, unlucky.
Yeah.
Enjoy yourself while you're here, but just look back on it afterwards. And, yes, they gave us a bit of stick, and we gave them a bit of stick, and we sort of said, see you tomorrow, and all that sort of thing. And it was all light-hearted, and off they went.
And then you walked out next day, and there was your biggest crowd you played in front of by far, about
Yes.
30,000 or something there.
No, it was only 20.
20,000.
20. Their normal league gate average was about 19.
Okay.
That's all. And the papers were predicting, and the supporters were predicting, you'll be lucky if you get 10 there tomorrow. And the papers were saying probably about 14, 15. And there was 21, which was above their league gate.
Okay.
First thing that I was surprised about was the quality of the surface. Wasn't great. I was expecting something a little bit more flat, level. But it wasn't that much better than a Southern League ground. So the other thing I remember when leading the players out onto the pitch was the Womble was in front of us.
Wasn't Hayden, was it?
No, it wasn't Hayden. No, it was a bigger Womble actually. But Mike Batteney's Wombles, the Womble songs were current at the time.
Yeah.
And there's a picture now that I've got at home that shows me leading the team out with a ball under one arm and the Womble just in front of me.
Yeah.
And the noise was deafening. I mean, people were making it.
Must have been quite something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It was a moment when your knees go wobbly, just for a fraction of a second, and you go out there and I mean, Burnley had Leighton James, who was a Welsh flyer, known for his speed. No, not a lot of tricks, but would go up to the fullback, kick it 10 yards past him and beat him by 4 yards, simply because he could fly. They had an English under 23 or under 21 goalkeeper, Ray Hankin, an international centre forward, Brian Flynn, Welsh international midfield player. So yes, they were seventh or sixth or seventh in the first division at that time, above Leeds. It might be added. So yeah, it was quite daunting when we ran out there.
Once you started, though,
once you started, you realise it's 11 against 11.
Yeah.
If I can just take you back, we were once going down to play Weymouth, and we were on the platform at Waterloo, and there was a big kerfuffle over to one side, and we were just standing around, and it was West Ham. And West Ham walked across with all their blazers and ties and things, and we were standing there like the poor relations, so to speak. And they walked past us and sort of just nodded, because one or two of our chaps knew one or two of their chaps. Johnny Cartwright in particular.
Right.
But when you see them in the flesh, they aren't 7 foot tall. They're not 6 foot wide. Yeah. They are just ordinary people, some of whom are no bigger than me, and I'm 5'7". Then you realise that the television builds people up to be gods, and you think that Bobby Moore was a great big centre half, and he wasn't.
Yeah.
And when we walked out at Burnley, and they walked out, and once the game starts, it's just 11 against 11.
So psychologically, you're thinking they're going to foot taller than you, and when you see them, they're the same size. Or
just the same team that we play every week.
That's interesting.
And the other thing, of course, is that Alan and Brian had done their homework. They watched Burnley. Brian was expert at going to watch a side and coming back with a dossier that thick on pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses. And we'd sat down and discussed it. And one of the things that they said was that Bobby Stockley was right back, and it was Selwyn, I think, whenever Leighton James got the ball and took it to Bobby Stockley, Selwyn doubled up behind him. It may have been Harry Bassett, but one of them was to double up, so that when he knocked it past him, the other one got the tackle in. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. So they were doubling up on the winger, which you would only do if you think your fullback's not got the speed to match the winger. And every time Leighton James knocked it past Bobby Stockley, yes, there was every chance he was going to beat Bobby, but someone else was coming in. Mm-hmm. Once or twice, they got there at the same time. And Leighton James, I can assure you, didn't win the tackle. Not with Not with Harry and not with Selwyn. I think maybe they had a foul or two given against him in the first half, but they were going in hard to make sure that he didn't get on a run, because that was his strength.
Was that Alan's partly his instructions to go in pretty hard on
No,
teams?
no, Alan never said that. What
Okay.
Alan said was, get to the ball at the right time.
Okay.
If he gets past Bobby Stockley, you've got to be there, you've got to knock it out of play or win the ball.
Yeah.
Alan would never say anything. Mickey Everett would say, hurt him if you have to. Alan would never say that.
Okay.
Alan was win the ball.
Yeah.
Don't
Okay.
matter what happens, win the ball.
Okay. And you were at Burnley, Turf Moor,
Yeah.
and Wimbledon scored a goal.
Yeah. Well, what happened was that it was in the second half. Dickie had the ball from an attack.
This is Dickie Guy, the goalkeeper, had
Dickie
the ball.
Guy
Yeah,
had the
yeah.
ball. One of the multitude of Burnley attacks, because let's be honest, we didn't go there to take the game to them. That wasn't on. We went there to play a tight game of football and to make sure that we picked them up and played it tight. Dickie got the ball, kicked it upfield. I was in our half, but I could see the ball dropping to one of their midfield players. With the pitch like it was, I felt that there was a good chance he might miscontrol it. So I started running as fast as I could. I was a good 30 to 40 yards away from him. As I ran, and when the ball got to him, I was a lot closer, and he went to trap it, and it went 10 yards in front of him. I got there first, and as I got there, they had two players like that, and I put it between the two of them and kept running, and by that time I was at speed, and I got round the back of them to the point where I was able to actually take the ball to the edge of the box and beyond, and I was able to have a clear shot at goal, which, to be honest, I wasn't particularly pleased with, because as I shot, I pulled it to the far post when in fact I meant to put it hard to the near post, because the goalkeeper, Alan Stevenson, had come out to shut me down, and I thought my best chance of scoring was to put it that side of him, low. And I actually put it that side of him. And he dived, and he got an arm to it. I'm not even sure it would have gone in, but he got an arm to it, and he pushed it out. And their defenders were coming back in to the penalty box to cover. The ball went between two of their defenders, and Mickey Marm was following up and hit a screamer into the net. A brilliant goal. He really hit it well. And it beat Stevenson. He didn't get a hand to it, and it went in there. I just wish we had video of it.
Well, you've described it pretty well.
Yeah, and after that, how can I describe it? It was the charge of the Light Brigade.
Yeah, you have to hang on.
We had to hang on, and,
Yeah.
and hang on we did. And it probably hasn't been said before. I've said it before, but in that game, Dickie played much better than he did at Leeds. That was, for me, was Dickie's game.
Right.
Dickie, Jeff Bryant, Dave Donaldson, Billy Edwards and Bobby Stockley at the back. They were heroic. They kept everything out. And that, for me, was the best game that Dickie ever played for Wimbledon.
Okay.
But
So-
he's credited with the Leeds game,
Yes.
when in fact he actually played magnificently against Burnley.
Okay. And what was the reaction at the end of the Burnley players? Did they say anything to you afterwards?
Apart from a shake of the hand and a well done, a begrudging well done,
Yeah.
that was about it.
They
Yeah.
must have been, because they later on that season they went on to be second and challenged for the championship.
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
Bob
they-
Lord was the chairman. Jimmy Adamson was
Yeah.
the manager,
Yeah.
and he was a good manager.
Yeah.
And he'd done quite a bit in his time. Yeah. They did very well.
So anyway, they then got back home, and the draw for the next round, the fourth round, was on the Monday, wasn't it? I think.
I'm not sure if it was
I think
Saturday or Monday. On the Monday.
I think it's on the
yeah.
Monday. And of course, they came out the hat. Number 7 was Leeds, and then something else was Wimbledon, and that
Yeah.
that must have been a fantastic boost for you to think,
Yeah.
going to play away at Ellen Road. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was another of those moments when you get goosebumps
Yeah.
when you hear it. You just try and think of what it will be like, and memories from that time, and of our travelling up there, and Harry Bassett eating snails in the restaurant the night before the game.
Is that what he did?
Yes, I thought Alan would stop him.
And of course, now the media was on to Wimbledon big time, wasn't it? This was
Yes.
serious stuff now.
Serious stuff. We appeared on Blue Peter.
Yeah.
There were interviews going on, and I can't remember if it was after the Burnley game. I think it was that Alan and myself, and I think Kieran Summers, our centre forward, went to the BBC studios and appeared on Match of the Day. I think the studios might have been in Leeds, but I can't remember for sure. And I think it was the Burnley game that we were interviewed on. And it's all sort of magic memories, really.
Yeah, and the Leeds game is more documented because there's footage of that. But it was pretty much a heroic... Leeds were at that time they weren't what they were they? They'd lost Don Revie to the England job, and then Cloughie could come in, lasted 44 days, which is now obviously...
yes.
I'm going to say serial. It's not serialised. There's the film and the book of that time,
Yes.
which is not the whole story, but it's based around the true
Yeah.
story. And I think, who was the manager of Leeds at that time?
Jimmy Armfield.
Jimmy Armfield, that's right. He was the manager.
Yes.
So did you feel you had any chance when you went out that day?
I think with the way that Alan had prepared us, and the thoroughness of his research, Brian Hall's research, and the way that they had told us to play for that particular game, and how we were going to try and stop them, in other words, cut out their danger men, yes, I thought that, I wouldn't say a chance of winning, but a chance of not losing. There was a chance, just a chance.
So you fancied your chances up there.
And when you say they were past their best, when you look at who they had in their squad, people like Sprake in goal, or it may have been the other goalie that was also an international, Reaney, Lorimer, Jordan.
They certainly had the player.
McQueen.
Yeah, and you're right, because of course they got to the European Cup final that year as well.
Yeah.
So maybe my assessment isn't quite fair there.
Yes, I can remember trying to sleep the night before and having difficulty, but finally fell asleep, and then waking up that morning and thinking, I wonder what today holds.
Because they were also the champions from the previous year, weren't they?
I think they were.
Yeah.
I think they were.
Yeah.
And again, going to the ground, which we hadn't done prior to the day, and the coach taking us into the ground and getting out the coach and seeing this massive stadium, which, I mean, in South London, not even Chelsea at that time matched the Leeds Stadium.
Because there was 46,000 people at that match, wasn't there?
There were 46,000 people at the match, but there was also part of it was shut off for building work.
Okay.
Which, when it was finished, I think took it over 50,000.
Yeah.
But yes, again, nothing like that was anticipated. Yeah. And when we ran out onto the pitch, and I would say a pitch that was far removed from Burnley's pitch, because this was a quality bit of grass.
Yeah.
And I think it had either been raining or it was raining. But you couldn't hear, this was a game where you couldn't hear, if you called to someone, you couldn't hear. And if someone called you, you wouldn't know. You made your decisions based on what you thought was best without anyone shouting. You just couldn't, you could hardly hear. The noise was deafening the whole game. And again, out on the pitch with the Womble, shaking hands with Billy Bremner. And again, I'm bigger than him, or bigger than he was. And again, Alan had told us what we needed to do. And my specific role on that day was to shut down Johnny Giles. Johnny Giles used to drift back towards the back four, would pick up the ball well inside their own half, make 10 or 20 yards forward, and then ping it diagonal to wingers or bring in the fullbacks or whatever as a playmaker. And my role was to stop him making those 10 or 20 yards. In other words, if he got the ball 20 yards inside their half, I was to go and shut him down. And Johnny Giles wasn't a quick player, but he was very skillful. So shutting him down wasn't difficult. It was making sure I made that 20 or 30 yards to shut him down when he got the ball. But I would say that my feeling was, at the time, that this game is nowhere near as quick as even the Burnley game. The impression I gained was that they thought they were going to win it at a canter, and they were just not happy to knock it about. If I can relate that to the current game, Luton and Oxford, first half, they were knocking the ball about very nicely.
Yeah.
They didn't create a lot,
Yeah.
but you got the impression they were just happy to knock it around and show us what the game was all about.
Yeah.
But it isn't about that. And we were sitting back letting them do this, whereas other First Division sides in their day would have been trying to get the ball off them. We were making sure that players didn't make runs through, or if they were tracked. If they did, they were tracked. And we wanted to play the tight game that Alan had taught us. And it's rather funny. The immediate aftermath of the game was that it started slowly, and it was not that much quicker than what we were used to. Our effort was being directed in shutting players down and giving them as short a time on the ball, making them move the ball on. And they didn't really create a lot in the first half. And then the second half started, and noticeably it was different.
They upped the tempo.
They upped the tempo. Jimmy Armfield had obviously got onto them and said, look, it's 0-0 and you need to play better than that. You need to do more than you're doing, and you need to make this team suffer. And suddenly, Madeley at right back was making 100-yard sprints up the line. Other players were getting forward. The tempo was getting much, much quicker. We were glad when someone went down or whatever to give us a breather, because it was getting to the point where you just didn't get a breather, and the game was getting really, really quick. And it was as much as that I could do was to keep on the pace, even with Johnny Giles. He was beginning to push forward as well, so I was tracking him forward and back, and of course his fitness was better than mine, I don't doubt, being a full-time pro. And I wouldn't say I was running out of steam, but I was finding it very, very difficult. And I was looking at some of our other guys and thinking they look as if they're under a lot of pressure as well. And the game got very, very quick.
Anyway, we need to speed up a bit now.
Yes,
because I'm looking at the clock and time's marching on.
Yeah.
So basically, you held out. It was 0-0. And then there was the replay that was...
Well, it wasn't 0-0. Just 0-0. There was the penalty.
The penalty save, yeah. We've covered that actually in the interview with Dickie.
Oh, right, okay.
We went over that in detail, yeah. Dickie made a penalty save, absolutely.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great penalty, but he made a very good save.
Very good save.
Yeah. And then there was... the replay was going to be at Plough Lane, but
yes.
The weather was bad. In the end, it was switched to Selhurst Park. There was another huge crowd, 45,000 people.
Yes.
Mainly this time supporting Wimbledon.
Yeah.
So again, sort of third cup game running, a massive roar when you came out, no doubt.
Yes.
Did you fancy your chances a bit there?
I thought that, yes, I thought that we might have a better chance if luck was on our side.
Yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't go out thinking that we would win, but I thought with the run of the ball and maybe with a little bit of luck on our side, we could do something. And I mean, the luck on our side on the Saturday was that they'd missed the penalty.
Yes.
Dickie had saved the penalty, and maybe we could do something. And the game all through was a little bit quicker. I got booked in the first half.
Had you worked during the day at the bank?
No.
No, they gave you the day off.
I got the day off, and we were training and we stayed at the Richmond Hill
So
Hotel.
you were a real celebrity at the bank by this time, weren't you?
Oh
Right,
yes,
yeah.
yes. I did a bank interview in our waiting room. Well, I was working at Sloane Square at the time, and I was getting letters from some of the executives, and the chief general manager of the bank. I got a note saying that his chauffeur would like a ticket.
Exactly, you were good PR
And someone
for
else
them,
wanted
yeah.
a ticket, and I met them in the bar after this person. I met them in the bar afterwards, and
So anyway, let's go back and briefly talk about the game at Selhurst Park. So you kind of matched them, and then there was the talk us through the goal.
the guy attacked Harry Bassett, and shot, not a very good shot, but it came off it hit Dave Bassett on the way.
Deflection,
Yeah. I think he hit the ball from inside the box, and the deflection was quite sharp. It was a 45-degree change of direction, and Dickie had already moved naturally.
He committed himself.
Well, with a shot from that range, the goalkeeper automatically commits himself to one side because he can see it. It all happened in an instant. The shot, Dickie saw the shot, dived, but the deflection was very, very quick, and it didn't give Dickie time to get up and change his mind. And it went in the opposite side.
Yeah, so Wimbledon lost 1-0, but it was tremendous credit for that unbelievable cup run.
Yes.
And went on to win the Southern League that season.
Yes, that's right. And everything that Alan had done had brought fruition.
Yeah, all in one season. That's incredible. He starts.
Yes,
and he starts with
he starts with no team basically.
And no money.
Yeah.
And then of course Wimbledon won the Southern League the following 2 seasons. There was a further cup adventure 2 years later at Middlesbrough.
Yes.
So did you play? I think you were.
Yes, I
played in that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then of course Wimbledon got elected to the Football League, but that wasn't exactly what you wanted, was it? Because you wanted to keep your career at the bank.
Yeah, I mean, I thought and still think that I could have stayed there another season, but the problem was that the training was going to be done at times that I couldn't do it. So, I thought I could have been maybe even a bit part player, but I did all the pre-season training,
yes,
which was, if anything, more fierce than anything that we'd done with Alan before, if that's possible. And again, I felt I was as fit as I could possibly be. And I came off the training pitch one night and I saw Freddie Callaghan, my old pal, standing on the one side. He was then manager somewhere, I can't remember where. And he said, "How often do you do that running?" And I said, "Well, we train 3 days a week and we probably do that twice a week." And he said, "You're going to be dead by the start of the season." Because he'd never seen it, you see.
Yeah.
But we were running a lot and working very, very hard to bring ourselves up a pace.
Yeah.
And then Alan said that the plan was to go full time or less part time, and I couldn't do the training, and that was it. And they asked me if I'd like to do some coaching, but that was at times with that I couldn't make either.
So you moved on to Slough Town.
I moved to Slough Town,
but then you had some injury problems, didn't you? There.
Yeah. Well, I had a year and three quarters, I think, year and a half with Slough, and I went to Slough because Brian Hall had gone to Slough.
Yeah.
The manager was Joe Arpino, but Brian Hall had gone to Slough, and Kieran Summers had gone to Slough. So I was going to something I knew. The other club that I might have gone to was Leatherhead, which is just up the road. But if you remember, Leatherhead's pitch used to flood quite a lot.
Okay.
And I remember playing there, and the pitch was so heavy that it was really difficult to run. But I went to Slough because of that and had a year and a half there, and we did quite well. At one stage we were top of the Isthmian League, and Brian then left to become his own man at Wealdstone, and Joe Arpino brought in a guy called Tommy Tranter, who was also a very, very good coach, and Tommy was good.
Okay.
And I got an injury. I got a cartilage problem, which was really the finish.
And then did you stay watching Wimbledon FC for a time? Did you go and watch them when you stopped playing?
Yes, but I didn't go. Yes, when they were at Plough Lane, I used to go down and watch whenever I could.
Yes.
And sometimes took my son with me. And And when they moved to Selhurst, I didn't go so often because the journey was harder, especially if I was getting home from work a bit later. But then when I did go, I didn't phone anybody up. I just went and paid my money and stood
Yes.
behind the goal with my son.
Yes.
And
now, of course, you're a regular at AFC Wimbledon.
I am indeed,
You
and
have been,
enjoying every moment.
and you're on the board of the PLC. And, well, we won't go into that now because I think everyone who's watching this knows the story. It's a fantastic story.
Yes.
And I think we're also proud to have you, you and Dickie and Tommy still coming to the man at Alan Batson as well, coming to... You come to the home matches and some of the away matches as well. So.
Yeah.
Anyway, Iain, it's fascinating hearing about your story. I'm going to have to stop. We've been going an hour and a quarter now, so we need to stop.
When you've got 3 hours to spare.
And let's hope that AFC Wimbledon get promoted again this season. That would be wonderful. And I will see you soon, and thanks for coming along.
Thank you very much, Iain.
And thank you very much for watching Cherry Red TV and AFC Wimbledon TV and hearing the Iain Cooke story. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye.